Hey, what's up? It is Cody from the Keepers of Nerdom. How y'all doing? We are back with another part of our series of Axis and Allies miniatures. Was it accurately represented in the game? And so today we are going to look at part one of Great Britain's vehicles. And the vehicles that I have are very. I'm not a huge Great Britain fan for World War II stuff, but I love the concepts that are presented here because they are fantastic and interesting and crazy and weird and all around bizarre. And a lot of actually what you'll find with Great Britain stuff occasionally, not occasionally, like a lot of the time, is that it's also things, especially later on in the war, for a while, that they were buying from the US. And so let's get into it and let's see what we got here. We'll start right here with the Humber Scout Car. The Humber Scout Car, first off, again, you'll notice size-wise very much disproportionate at times where the vehicles, like the cars and whatnot, armored cars, are massive. There's its listing, Wizards of the Coast, made in China, apparently. And so we'll go through it because my stat book doesn't really have a whole lot on this, but it is an 8-point vehicle for 5 speed with a 3-2 defense. So apparently they are saying it has some decent armor on the front. The anti-tank abilities with the machine guns is very minimal, so it could penetrate potentially very, very low defense vehicles that have some mild armor. But overall, the machine guns, 987, this has got some serious machine guns. And then gameplay-wise, this is where things get weird. High gear 2, if this unit makes its entire move along the road, it gets +2 speed. It's already a 5 speed, okay? So 7... possibly, I think you get a bonus 1 anyway. So this is an 8-speed movement, so it can get places really fast and take over areas. Strike and Fade 2. In your assault phase, this unit can move at speed 2 after attacking. So if you go first again, there's this Strike and Fade thing. And gameplay-wise, this is really strong, and so all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to take these just to start killing the infantry before they get onto the point, and then I can't get rid of them. And then you can run and hide before they have the ability to take you out with anti-tank weapons. So, gameplay-wise, amazing. Accuracy, I would say, this is a little too fast. There's a little too much going on here because what we've really got and what we're seeing is just crazy, crazy amounts of speed. And granted, this should have speed, but let's be honest, I think it's a little overshown right here. So our next thing, I would say the Humber Scout Car, it should be good, and with 2 machine guns on it, granted it should be very deadly against infantry, but as we've already seen in the previous video, that just doesn't entirely make sense with how much the machine guns on other vehicles are represented, and maybe it's just they're representing the 2 of them without giving them 2 shots. And if that's the case, okay. Universal Carrier, we need to talk about this because this is a vehicle, and it is an odd vehicle, granted, but I think it's an important vehicle for just overall Great Britain as a whole. It has up to 10 millimeters of armor, so again, only a 2-2 defense. There's a reason, because it has very little. But it's made to just protect from small arms fire the people that are in it, although it is still open hatched. And so I actually really appreciate the model. It's very fascinating, very simplistic, and that's what it's designed to be, is just essentially a glorified tractor that's carrying troops and supplies around, and also, hook up a hitch on the back. And they have something on the back here just to represent that potential, but not necessarily an actual hitch. So let's go through this really quickly. 7.65, so they're saying it's armed with machine guns at best. Main gun on this is variable because it's just whatever you can attach to the hull. Anti-tank weapon has the potential of something, apparently, but it's they're just representing the fact that you could put anything and everything on this, which, okay. I'd say really it doesn't look like it would really be able to carry an actual anti-tank weapon, so having a 5 at all is kind of silly. But let's go through this gun transport. This unit has the transport ability. It does have 4 speed, by the way, for 10 points, but without the restriction against carrying artillery. This unit can carry 1 soldier. A friendly soldier can board or dismount this unit instead of moving during your movement phase. So you can get a soldier faster to a spot, but you can also carry artillery because you can hook them to the back of the vehicle. Pretty cool. And it makes sense, and it actually is totally accurate to what this thing is. High gear 1, if this unit makes this entire move along the road, it gets +1 speed, so it actually gets a bonus anyway, so it would be up to a 6 speed from that ability plus the regular just bonus every vehicle gets if they move along a road. So really, I think overall accurate other than this right here. Whoa, my camera is freaking out right now trying to focus on that. But yeah, that right there just really meh. Sad to me to see that because it just doesn't make sense. There's no anti-tank guns on this, and it's just assuming the troopers inside of it have something. You got to be careful about that because if the vehicle doesn't show it, I would say don't represent it. But again, with this kind of, this is a little bit of a weird exception because it just doesn't make sense because it's a carrier rather than a tank. So you're really accurately representing only based on the things that come inside of it, with like the vehicle, the soldiers that are in it as well. So what we have here is the Crusader 2. Overall, I remember pulling this a long time ago. It's a rare tank, being very disappointed because it's not great, but yet actually also really excited because it's a really fun vehicle. The turret is fascinatingly weird, and even in pictures, it is actually pretty accurate representation of the vehicle. You know, these aren't going to be the most accurate of all models you ever see, but the fact that they're pre-painted, little plastic miniatures that have some movability, and even the turrets can go off and up and down. This one, it looks like it's supposed to, but it barely moves at all. But this is a fascinating thing. It's armed with a 6-pounder 57mm gun. And let's just talk through this for a bit here, and I'll put it right there. The Crusader 2, according to the game, it was a fun one to pull. At the time, I didn't realize how fun it would be. And I actually had to buy its, essentially its big brother in a way, separate because I never pulled it. And it's from, different sets, okay. So Crusader 2 costs 11 points. It has a speed of 4, so very fast, which actually makes sense because this thing, its max speed was 26 miles per hour. Real quick, the Universal Carrier had a max speed of 29 miles per hour. So it had a speed of 4 as well as this one, but it also could get even faster based on being on a road. So it makes sense. This is a fast vehicle for its time frame, 1941, pretty early in the war. And defense of 4.3. It has almost 2 inches worth of armor, 49mm. I would say you're on the edge of this. I don't know that it should be a 4, but I don't know if it should be a 3. If there's such a thing as a 3.5, I think this would be the perfect example for it because it's just not quite that heavily armored as a 4 defense. Because, for example, a Sherman, which they represent in the game with a 5 defense, has a, let me find it, M3 Stuart. Oh, that's funny. Okay, sorry, trying to find the Sherman. And of course, the Sherman won't show up for me whenever I need it to, even though it's like the most popular tank. Medium tank, okay, there's the early one, has 2 inches fully of armor. Okay, so it's a little less. Okay, 4 works. 4 works. We'll go with it. 4 is fine. It's fast. It's machine gun wise, very, very low. Very low. I'm not a fan of that. They're mechanically unreliable, and I think that's interesting. That let's look at the abilities. You know, gun on here is 57mm. Not a great gun. It's interesting. 986 doesn't hit very hard, but it's also British tank design. I will say tank design for Britain is fascinating in World War II because it's either heavily armored or tries to be super fast with no armor, but oftentimes just they don't have very big guns in general, except for some random exceptions like the Archer. And it's strange how they built things. So Vanguard, after both armies are deployed, this unit can move at speed 4 before the first turn begins. That's where this vehicle all of a sudden becomes super, super, super cool. Just because you can get to an objective fast. You can get that 4 speed just to start off because the idea that this was a special ability that several vehicles had for Great Britain in this game, which I appreciate. Prone to breakdown, though, this unit can't move while damaged. So after you get rid of disruption, often what would happen was it would say, okay, now you can still move, but you have to suffer a -1 to all your stats, -1 to hit, -1 to your defenses, -1 to your speed. But this thing, while damaged, is just stuck, which I I think is accurate because they are mechanically unreliable, and the book I have also says that as well. Just insane. Now, I will say the Crusader 2. So the Crusader 2 may actually only have a 40 millimeter gun on this thing instead of the 57, because it seems like the Mark III was the one with the 57 millimeter. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, weird. I think overall, this accurately represents this vehicle in a lot of ways. The only thing I would say is the one extra thing, and it would be really obnoxious and hard to simulate, is rolling. If you move all 4 of your movement, every turn that you did that, you'd have to roll like a d6, and every time you rolled a 1, it immediately was disrupted because it breaks down. Something like that. I think that would more accurately fully represent it. But overall, it works. It works very well. So let's go on to our next weird vehicle from Great Britain. We're going only into the smaller little guys today because we've got several of them, because Great Britain's getting into the bigger factions, and so they have more vehicles than others, and they have more vehicles. So this will be the Mark VII Tetrarch. And this little boy was very interesting because it was actually an airborne tank, one that they used gliders on, if memory serves, to drop. And so this thing was armed with a 2-pounder 40 millimeter gun, only has 14 millimeters of armor at the most, 0.55 inches. That's it. Yeah, this is weird. So the Hamilcar glider was used for the Tetrarch, and it was dropped. It was deployed. So let's look at this thing. It has a max speed of 39.74 miles per hour. So this is a fast little bugger. That's way faster than the Crusader. So let's see if it has nothing. It should have a higher speed then. It really should. So a speed of 4, 12 points, 664 against infantry, so better than the Crusader 2x1 on the short and mediums. 986, so same gun they're saying, the 2-pounder 40 millimeter. So yep, that Crusader 2 would be armed with the 40 millimeter. 2-2 defense. Yep, it has no armor, basically. It's just barely there. It's made for just protecting from small arms fire. It should have more speed, at least a 5, maybe more. Glider borne. During deployment, deploy this unit in any unoccupied hex not in your opponent's starting area. So that's also its bonus to its speed in a way, that it actually gets its speed from, you can just deploy it like a paratrooper in the game, which is really cool. Like, overall, this is decently accurate. The one thing it's missing, as we've stated here, is just it should have a little bit more speed based on the speed it has. Now, the next tank is actually awfully similar to it, and it actually is something we have to turn over to the U.S. section for, but it's under Great Britain because of the weirdness of this. This is actually the M22 Locust. And honestly, I love this tank design. It is beautiful, just pretty. Like, if you upsize this vehicle, like, this would just be, to me, the perfect concept tank design in a way. Just early tank design concepts. So this was actually 1945, and the Tetrarch was from 44. So very late in the war, actually, even though it looks like, in ways, an earlier tank design. It does have almost an inch worth of armor, 0.98 inches worth of armor, and that's actually reflected in its defenses of a 3 on the front. And it is packing a 37 millimeter, so not even the 40 millimeter gun of the other vehicle. And that is reflected only in a difference of, if you'll notice here, in medium range against vehicles, 7 versus an 8. It is 1 point more expensive than the other. They have the exact same machine gun against anti-infantry. This has a speed of 4 as well, with a top speed of 39.74 miles per hour. High gear 1, if this unit makes its entire move along a road, it gets +1 speed. Gliderborne, same thing as well. But what's funny about that is it does get a bonus to its speed that the Tetrarch doesn't, and they have almost identical movements. 39.74, 39.74 max speed. They are identical on movement, but yet this gets a high gear. So something about this, they're saying represents it better. I think the Tetrarch deserved this as well, if not just giving them a +1 speed. Overall, would I take this over the Tetrarch? No. It's way cooler looking, but the Tetrarch is 1 point cheaper, and I guess the one thing you do get is an extra defense. So that is true. But you do lose that extra 1 attack die on medium range, because you roll this many attack dice when you attack. So at short range against vehicles, you roll 9 attack dice, and you take the averages of that. You take your hits out of those to see if you actually hit. Really interesting, because it's an American design that was handed over to the British to use with the Hamilcar glider as well, and so it's a very different thing, and I don't know, it's just interesting because the 37mm gun definitely is reflected a little bit there, that there's 3mm difference, but apparently it was a decent gun comparatively to the Tetrarchs, so still usable. I don't know, bizarre. I think it's decently accurate. Again, it's the speed question, and yeah, fascinating. So let's come to the M3 Stuart, M3. And as you can see, the machine gun over time has been slowly bent to high heaven up here. And so he is trying to move on his own. The M3 Stuart is actually an American design, because there was it was a Lend-Lease, I believe, that the U.S. was doing with Russia and also, Great Britain, especially Great Britain at the start. And that's the funny thing, like you'll see some of the Russian vehicles in this game, and also the vehicles for Great Britain that are actually U.S. vehicles. And I was never a fan of this vehicle when I started the game. I hated it because it's just, when you look at it, U.S. tank design in World War II is very tall. And also this idea that you'll see a lot of is they want to put a machine gun on everything. Anywhere and everywhere that there's room or a hole for it, they'll put a machine gun in it. This vehicle was all the way back in 1941, and it is armed with a 37mm gun. So it is more of a reconnaissance vehicle. This is only an uncommon, so you could... we pulled a few of these, to say the least. And I don't remember if the U.S. technically has them or not in the game. I don't remember. I'll have to look. But 15 points, so it's even more than the other things. It does have a 9.75, so it has a worse gun even than the Locust at the long range. It does have way better stats, though, against anti-infantry. 5 speed, okay? This thing, its average speed was 37.26 miles per hour, which ironically is less than the Locust and the Tetrarch. Why does this have 5 speed and the others 2 don't? I don't get it. You see what I mean? These are the problems that are fascinating. This thing does have 2.01 inches of armor up max, 51 millimeters, so definitely way more than the Locust. So the 4 defense is accurately represented here. Makes sense with it and the Crusader 2. So you are paying some points for the armor there. And the ability here of All Guns Blazing. After this unit attacks in your assault phase, it can make 1 extra attack against a soldier. So it's representing the fact that it has machine guns everywhere. Unfortunately, they're not really accurately represented on the model itself, just the one up on the top. But if you can see in the picture, there are multiple things sticking out all over the place. And there are rivets on this thing. I think overall, the armor is a little hefty. I think sometimes 4 was a little too much for some of these vehicles, like the Crusader 2 and this. I just don't know if they really should have that represented again. And also, again, just pointing out, this has a speed of 5, but yet the Locust and the Tetrarch, who are faster than it, don't. They should have a speed of 5. This should have a speed of 4. That's my thoughts on this. So is this accurate? I think it's messed up with that in game, but also just stats that we have on file. And so the last one for today that we'll come to and talk about is the Valentine 2. Very, very different from the Valentine 1 because they are very, very different vehicles. They just happen to share a name. And I had to order this thing separately because I never pulled it. And I think this was from the base set of the game. It was either the base set or it was a set 2. I don't remember for sure. I think it's base set. And so this thing, oh my goodness, I'm excited to talk about it. I don't remember if Great Britain ever had the Matilda in the game, and I'm kind of sad if it didn't. I think it did. It better have. So if it didn't, I'm going to be upset. It never did. At least whenever I was playing, they never put the Matilda in, which is really, really sad. Yeah, so yuck, that saddens my soul. So I had to at least get the Valentine too, because I played World of Tanks, and the Valentine and the Matilda are fascinating vehicles that very heavy armor. Their guns aren't great, but they themselves are heavy boys. And so as you'll notice, there's one small issue that there's a decently flat space up at the front of a Valentine, which is really, really bad tank design, because that's just going to catch rounds right into it and not necessarily like make a trap in between like the turret and the hull, but a flat space is really easy to penetrate. But the armor on this thing is 65 millimeters maximum in certain spots, so 2.56 inches. It's armed with a 40 millimeter 2-pounder gun. So overall, this thing is, especially early on in the war, because this was 1940, this bad dog was heavy. So it's going up against some of these German tanks and just taking a beating and keep on going because it has such heavy armor. And so the Valentine, especially the chassis, was used later on in the war whenever, especially its gun, becomes way underpowered to be used for other vehicles. And I believe the Archer may be based on this. Is it based on that? I think so. Yep. So it was, yeah, the Archer self-propelled gun was put on the hull of the Valentine. And so the Valentine is fascinating. Let's look at it right here. This 16 points, speed of 3. It is got a max speed on here of 14.90 miles per hour. It honestly could probably be a speed of 2. I appreciate that they put nothing special here, because what's special about this vehicle is its stats. It's just its stats, and I appreciate that. It doesn't have to have anything special beyond that. It can just have things like this. A 5.5 defense. So overall, they are saying it is armored up very heavily across the board. And to be fair, even when you look at the back of it, it's got sloping armor, and so it actually has more sloping around the edges, and then at the front is where it's really not sloped, but it's got a very heavy armor spot there. So let's look through this further. 5.54, it is not an anti-infantry vehicle at all. Like it is pathetic in that way. And so it's kind of sad. But the gun on here, which is just 40 millimeters and 9.86, the same kind of gun stats as the Crusader 2 for 5 more points. But let's just illustrate this. Like these are, Crusader came out in 1941 according to these cards versus 1940, and stat-wise over here, they are identical. So what are you paying for? Because this is faster, this has less armor, but it is 5 points less. What are you paying for over here? It's the armor. It's the ability to just hang in a firefight way longer than this thing. This thing's going to get up there and take the hill for you. This thing will get there eventually and hold the hill longer. And I think that's the interesting fun about the game, is that you could design these two different types of vehicles. You know, in actual World War II, they were designed for very different functions. This thing probably should only be a speed 2. But that's the fascinating thing about this tank. I think overall it's accurately represented, other than the speed maybe. And I don't know about the machine gun side of that, but let's see. Okay, so here's what's crazy. This thing started with a 2-pounder 40 millimeter gun, later had a 57 millimeter 6-pounder gun, and eventually had a 75 millimeter 2.96 inch gun. So that's a lot. And so we're looking at the very base one of the 40 millimeter gun. Overall, I think it's accurately represented, other than the speed, but it's also, how do you represent a speed of 2.5? Because I don't know that it should go all the way down to a 2, but it shouldn't be probably a 3, because it's not that fast. So yeah, this is the start of Great Britain, and I had to literally order this one because I wanted it, especially to have these two functioning together because they're both fascinating parts of Great Britain's history. It's not a faction that I enjoy playing all the time, but when I do, this guy always has to come out because I love seeing him on the field of battle. And unfortunately, there's no Matilda in the first sets that I can remember, which really breaks my heart because Matilda was even heavily armored than the Valentine. And it's like, would it have a 6.6 or a 6.5 and, you know, be a cheaper tank that just sits there and doesn't die, but doesn't necessarily have a very good gun? Those are the fun kind of vehicles. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the balance of this game? Is it accurate to World War II? And which faction do you enjoy playing the most in Axis and Allies miniatures or other World War II war games? I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.